The hum of the dishwasher was the only sound in the kitchen as Mara Sterling stood at the sink, staring blankly out the window. The early November wind stirred the dead leaves on the patio, making them dance in small, frantic circles. Behind her, the clock ticked with dull precision. 7:46 p.m. Liam would be home in 14 minutes. She glanced at her phone again. No new messages. The last one from him had been 6 hours ago. Running late, court adjourned. Should be home for dinner. The kind of casual lie she had learned to decipher over the past 6 months. 6 months since she'd first seen the message. On his locked phone screen. A woman's name she didn't recognize. Elise. Followed by, "Miss you already." It had taken Mara another week to figure out who she was. Another 3 to confirm the affair. She hadn't said a word. Not yet. Chapter 2. The dinner table. Liam dropped his keys into the ceramic bowl by the door and called out, "Hey, I'm back!" "In the kitchen," Mara said, her voice even. He came in smelling faintly of whiskey and woodsy cologne, carrying the tension of the courtroom in his shoulders. A defense attorney for a white-collar firm, Liam had long grown used to deception. His charisma, polished, persuasive, was part of his job. And lately she had wondered if he even knew when he was lying anymore. Dinner was roast chicken and rice pilaf, like nothing had changed. "You're quiet," he said halfway through his second glass of wine. "Just tired," he smiled, though his eyes darted. "Long day at the clinic?" "Long month," she replied, her eyes lingering on him just long enough to make him uncomfortable. Chapter 3. The other woman, Elise Moran, was 28, a legal assistant at his firm. Beautiful in a way Mara hadn't felt in years, effortless, uncreased by motherhood or marriage or nights spent worrying about bills or fertility treatments. Elise hadn't known he was married at first. That's what Liam told himself. But she hadn't asked either. And now, she knew. She'd even sent Mara an email once, unsigned, anonymous, cruel in its subtlety. Mara hadn't responded. Instead, she started to collect phone records, GPS data, receipts, a USB of emails forwarded to herself, quietly, from Liam's laptop while he showered. She wasn't sure what she planned to do with them yet, only that she needed to hold proof, something to stop her from being gaslit into silence. Chapter 4. The brother it was Nick, who finally made her speak. Her younger brother had come by unannounced, dropping off soup after hearing she was under the weather. He found her in the living room, surrounded by papers and timelines. He stared for a long moment. "Mara, what is all this?" And it spilled out, clumsy and bitter and fast. Nick's jaw clenched as he took it in. "You going to confront him?" "Eventually." "You need to end this." She shook her head. "Not yet." His eyes darkened. "You're not thinking about doing something drastic?" "Not like that," she whispered. "But maybe something that reminds him I'm not the fool he thinks I am." Chapter 5. The Confrontation. 2 weeks later, on a fog-choked Sunday morning, Mara handed Liam a manila envelope over breakfast. He opened it with the same hands he used to touch her once. Inside were photographs, printouts, call logs. He didn't speak for a long time. Then finally, "How long have you known?" "Long enough to wonder if there was ever an us at all." "Mara, She stopped him with a raised hand. "Don't apologize unless you mean it. And don't explain unless you plan to be honest." Liam looked stricken. "I didn't plan for any of this." "That's the problem, Liam. You planned everything else in your life. Your job, our home, even the weekend trips. But you didn't plan for me." Chapter 6. The fallout Elise quit the firm. Liam moved into a furnished short-term apartment close to his office. Mara stayed in the house. The silence there grew heavier, louder, but it was hers. She returned to her clinic work, poured herself into her patients, into other people's pain so she didn't have to confront her own. Nick visited more often. Liam called, once, then again, then nightly. Sometimes she answered. Sometimes she didn't. He never begged, never denied. He only asked questions that made her ache. Was it all that bad? Did you ever love me? Do you think I could fix this? Chapter 7. The decision months passed. Mara sat in her therapist's office one evening, knees tucked under her, tears dry but her voice trembling. I want to forgive him, she said, but I don't know who I become if I do. Her therapist leaned forward gently. Then maybe the question isn't about forgiveness. Maybe it's, what do you want, separate from the hurt? Can you find yourself in that answer? Mara nodded, slowly. Final chapter. The open door spring returned. The dogwood trees in their backyard bloomed again, like they had the year they moved in. Liam stood on the front porch, holding a letter in his hand. Not a text. Not an email. A letter Mara had written and mailed to him. He read it twice before knocking. Inside, Mara brewed coffee, her hands calm. She opened the door. No words. They stood there for a moment, the past between them like a canyon neither could yet cross. But the door was open, and she hadn't asked him to leave. Liam stepped inside like he was entering a church, reverent, guilty, unsure of whether he belonged. Mara led him into the kitchen, the same place she had first placed the envelope on the table. She didn't speak right away, just poured him a cup and slid it across. He watched her hands, steady, soft, and still wearing her ring. You wrote? He said at last. You read it? He nodded. Twice. Then a third time. Slowly. There was a long silence. The letter had been brief. Not poetic, not cruel. Just real. I don't hate you, Liam. I don't even think I want revenge. But I can't pretend the past didn't happen. And I don't know yet what I want from the future, except that it needs to be mine, not just ours. If you want to try, I need full truth. I need you to bleed a little too. Now, Mara looked at him with a quiet intensity. So, are you ready for that? Liam exhaled. Yes. Chapter 9. The therapy sessions. They started attending couples therapy. At first, Liam answered questions like he was in court. Articulate, defensive, vague. But the therapist cut through him with calm insistence. Why her? Mara had asked one day. I don't know, Liam said at first. That's not good. Enough, Mara replied. I need to understand. It wasn't about her, he finally admitted. It was about losing who I used to be. About control. About feeling like a man again. The honesty hurt more than the lies, but it was something. He also confessed about other things, not other women, but other absences. The nights he mentally checked out, the way he built walls around his stress and shoved Mara behind them. You were my home, he said once, eyes wet. And I locked you out. Chapter 10. Elise's Return. 6 months later, Elise showed up at Mara's clinic, pregnant, alone. Mara almost didn't recognize her. She had lost the shine, the effortless beauty. She looked raw now, human, broken, in her own way. I'm not here to stir trouble, Elise said quietly. I'm not even keeping the baby. I just needed to tell someone. Why me? Because I thought you were the villain once. Now I think you were the only one trying to survive. Mara stared at her, breath caught. You're not the reason. Liam and I fell apart, she said, but you're part of why we might never get back together. I know, Elise whispered. I'm sorry, and she meant it. Chapter 11. A Choice. Deferred later that night, Mara told Liam about Elise. He closed his eyes for a long time. Was it mine? I don't know. She doesn't know. And if it was, then I'd need more time than I thought. The conversation ended there. Not in an explosion, not in collapse, just silence. A painful, necessary kind. Final chapter, The Quiet. Before 1 year to the day after the envelope on the table, Mara stood at the same window looking out into a garden she'd finally started tending again. Liam still lived in the city, but they met for dinner now and then. Sometimes it felt like progress, other times like limbo. They had not divorced. They had not moved back in. They were paused. Nick had gotten engaged. Mara had reconnected with old friends. Liam had started working pro bono cases again. They were both, in small ways, changing. The betrayal no longer burned like fire. But it left a permanent ache, like a healed fracture that flares when it rains. And that morning, when Liam texted, "Dinner this Friday? Same place as last time?" she smiled faintly. "Yes. Let's talk." Friday night came with gray skies and a drizzle that turned the city into a watercolor painting. Liam arrived at the restaurant early, nervous in a way he hadn't been in years. He wore the same navy sweater Mara had once told him made him look less like a lawyer and more like a person. He didn't touch the wine list. He didn't want to dull the edge. When Mara walked in, her expression was unreadable, beautiful, distant. She sat across from him like she had 100 times before, but now everything felt weighted, cautious, sacred. They ordered. They spoke, lightly of work, of a documentary she was watching, of his colleague's new rescue dog. But the real words hung in the space between them. After the plates were cleared, Liam leaned forward. "I've been thinking about your letter again, about what you wrote, that you needed me to bleed." Mara looked down, quiet. "I bled," he said, "just not all at once. I think I expected punishment to be loud and fast, like the way it happens in court. But it was slower. The days I didn't hear from you. The empty apartment. Elise's name in my mind like a wound that wouldn't close." She didn't interrupt. He needed to say it, and she needed to hear it. "I hated what I did," he continued. "But for a long time I hated that you wouldn't let me fix it more, that you didn't fight for us harder, and I see now that wasn't your job." Her eyes lifted. "I wanted forgiveness to be quick," he said. "But you were the one living with the damage." Mara's voice was soft but steady. "And now? I'm still sorry. I still love you. But I don't expect anything. I just wanted to stop pretending that time alone would fix what I broke." She nodded. There were tears in her eyes, but she didn't wipe them away. Chapter 13. Mara and the Mirror. Later that week, Mara stood in her bathroom, looking at herself in the mirror. Her hair was different now, shorter, a shade darker. Her body was hers again, in a way it hadn't felt in years. She thought about Elise, about the day she came in, trembling, about the not knowing, and about how strangely Mara didn't feel rage anymore. She felt grief, for the girl Elise had been, for the girl she had been. She thought of Liam, of what he said, how he finally understood that some things couldn't be forced into healing. Forgiveness wasn't linear. Some days she wanted to call him and tell him she missed him. Other days she replayed the lies in her head until her stomach knotted. She didn't have answers, but she had boundaries now, and for the first time in months she felt something unexpected. Peace. Chapter 14. The investigation Nick, ever protective, had quietly opened his own side inquiry after Elise's visit. He told Mara this one night over coffee. He'd spoken to a friend in law enforcement. There was no formal paternity test, no paperwork. Elise had terminated the pregnancy a month later and disappeared from the city. No one can trace her now, Nick said. Mara stirred her coffee slowly. I don't want to. Nick looked at her, surprised. She wasn't the cause, Nick. She was a symptom of something already broken. Nick shook his head. Still, you deserve someone who wouldn't let it get that broken. I do, she agreed. But maybe that person is me. Chapter 15. A new threshold. Months passed. Spring came. The garden behind Mara's home bloomed in full color. One morning, Liam came by unannounced, not with flowers or apologies, but a box of things he'd found. Old photos, a scratched CD mix she'd made him, a journal from their first year of marriage. I wasn't sure if I should keep these, he said, but they're not mine to throw away. Mara thumbed through them, quiet. One photo showed them on a hike, sun-drunk and smiling, faces full of hope. Do you still believe in us? She asked. I believe in who we were, he said, and maybe in who we could be. But I don't want to resurrect the past. I want to build something new, if you ever want that. She looked at him for a long time. I'll let you know, she said softly. Final passage. That night, Mara sat outside, the old photo beside her, the garden breathing in moonlight. The past lived in boxes now, in fragments, but her life, messy, fractured, and real, was unfolding in the present. She didn't know what choice she would make, but it would be hers. The first thing Nick noticed when he stepped into Mara's backyard was the laughter, real, unguarded, like it hadn't been choked out by guilt or grief. It came from the patio where Mara stood beside a man pouring wine. Nick's stomach tensed, reflexively but relaxed when he recognized the man. Liam, older now, his temples dusted with gray, the same deep voice but quieter somehow, more careful with its weight. Nick lingered near the garden gate before approaching. 3 years ago, he wouldn't have come. He'd have sent a message, maybe, or stayed in his own bubble of righteousness. But time has a strange way of dulling the sword you cling to. Nick, Mara called. You made it. He smiled, hugged her. Had to see it for myself. The garden was blooming. The stone walkway had been redone, the small details, lights. Strung across the pergola, a new coat of paint on the back door, told a quiet story of care. And then Nick turned to Liam. They shook hands. No words, just a nod between men who had both stood on opposite sides of pain. Later, in the kitchen, Nick leaned against the counter, watching Mara slice strawberries. Are you two back together? He asked gently. Mara didn't look up. No, not like before, but he's here. He is. Sometimes. And that's enough? She set the knife down and finally met his eyes. It's more than it used to be, but we don't label it. We learned the hard way how labels make people cling to something that's already crumbling. Nick sighed. I still don't know how you forgave him. I didn't, not fully, but I let go of punishing him. Same thing? No, she said. Forgiveness is about releasing me. Punishment was about controlling him. That night, as guests left, Liam remained behind, helping with dishes like it was old times. The familiarity wasn't sad anymore. It was warm, tentative, lived in. At the door, he turned to her. I'll call you tomorrow? Mara nodded. Take care of yourself. You too. He left, and the silence that followed didn't feel empty. It felt earned. Final scene. Nick stood on the porch, watching Mara, through the window. She was alone now, barefoot, picking up stray napkins from the grass. There was something beautiful in her solitude. Something unbroken, even after everything. He didn't know if she and Liam would remarry, didn't know if the story would end in reunion or permanent distance. But he knew one thing. Mara had become her own resolution, and sometimes that was the only ending anyone truly needed. For months after she left the city, Elise moved like a ghost. She rented a small studio apartment in upstate New York, bare walls, mismatched furniture, a cracked window that whistled when the wind passed through. It suited her. She didn't deserve comfort. Most days, she kept to herself. She picked up shifts at a bookstore downtown, where no one asked about her past or the subtle sadness in her eyes. She started therapy, though at first she lied to the therapist about nearly everything. Then, one afternoon, she didn't. "I had an affair with a married man," she admitted. "I thought I was in love, but I think I was just lost. I was pregnant." "I ended it. I ran," her therapist asked the obvious. "Why did you run?" "Because I couldn't face the woman I'd hurt, and I couldn't face the version of me that let it happen." Chapter 2. The letter. She never sent Elise, wrote it on a rainy afternoon, folded the paper twice, addressed it to Mara, and never mailed it. "Mara, I'm not asking you to forgive me. I just need you to know, I see it now. The damage. The depth of what I stepped into, of what I broke. You were never the enemy. You were the collateral in a war I didn't understand I was fighting. I hope you're free now. I hope you're happy. I hope he never makes you question your worth again. I'm trying to become someone I don't hate. I know that's not enough, but it's something. Elise." She burned it that night in a ceramic bowl on the windowsill. Ashes didn't beg for forgiveness. They simply disappeared. Chapter 3. A glimmer one summer, a customer came into the shop, a quiet woman named Dana with a half-smile and a quick wit. Over time, they began talking about books, then coffee, then fears. Dana had also left something behind. A bad marriage. A life she couldn't repair. For the first time in years, Elise didn't feel like a villain in someone else's story. She felt seen. They started going to poetry readings. Elise began journaling again, small rituals, slow healing. She didn't speak of Liam, or the pregnancy, or Mara. Not yet. But one day, as they walked by the river, Dana asked, "What's the worst thing you've ever done?" Elise paused. "I hurt someone kind. I made her doubt everything she believed." About love. Dana didn't press. She simply took Elise's hand. Chapter 4. Closure in Absence. Years later, Elise saw Liam by chance, at a conference bookstore in the city, surrounded by shelves. He didn't notice her. He looked older, sadder, softer. He picked up a novel she once recommended, held it like it had history. Elise turned and walked out before he saw her. She didn't need to speak to him. Didn't need to apologize again. Some stories didn't need a second chapter. Some wounds stopped bleeding even if the scar never faded. Final scene. Elise's piece. Elise now taught creative writing at a community college. Her students knew nothing about the woman she had been. In her office hung a single quote by Rilke. "Perhaps everything terrible is in its deepest being something helpless that wants help from us." Some ghosts stayed buried, or at least they were supposed to, but life had a cruel sense of humor and a habit of dangling closure where wounds once bled. It was a charity fundraiser of all things, art and education for underserved communities. The kind of thing Mara had poured herself into after Liam moved out for good. Neither of them ever formally saying it was over, but both silently agreeing it was. She had become her own island, but an island can still be reached by the occasional. Mara was adjusting a name placard when she heard a voice behind her. Clear, softer now, tentative. "Hi." "Mara." She turned. Elise, her hair shorter, her posture straighter. The chaos that once clung to her seemed distant, replaced by a worn humility. She was here alone. No Liam, no child in tow. For a long moment, Neither of them spoke. Then Mara offered a faint nod. "You're here. I didn't know you'd be involved. I'm just a guest. A friend invited me. I teach in the city now." Of course you do, Mara thought. Elise had always loved words. They stood in silence amid the hum of chatter and clinking wine glasses. Then Mara asked, "Did you have the baby?" A flicker passed across Elise's face. "No, I lost it. Late term. Complications." "I'm sorry. I know that might be hard to hear. I didn't tell anyone. I didn't know how. Maybe I didn't want anyone's pity or forgiveness." Mara stared at her. "I'm not angry anymore." That surprised both of them. "I was," Mara added, "furious, but it was eating me alive. And after a while I realized I didn't want to spend the rest of my life in the shadow of someone else's choices." Elise's eyes glistened. "I think about you a lot." "You shouldn't," Mara said quietly. "That part of the story is over." "But what if I still carry it with me?" Elise's voice cracked. "What if I'm still trying to make it right?" "Then live better," Mara said, her voice firm but not unkind. "You don't need my permission to redeem yourself." Chapter: Liam's Confession. That night, Mara sat in the quiet of her apartment sipping tea, the city glowing beyond her window. A knock at her door. Unexpected. Liam. He held a small book, a collection of old memories. Their Italy trip, their first apartment, a ticket stub from the jazz club where he proposed. "I saw her today," Mara said before he could speak. "I know. She told me she might run into you." They sat, in silence. "I've rewritten this story 1,000 times in my head," Liam said, "trying to find a version where I wasn't the villain." "You weren't a villain," Mara said. "You were weak, and you were dishonest. But I loved you once. That doesn't go away." "I miss us." Mara smiled, sad. "I miss who we were, but I don't think we could be that again." Liam nodded, eyes glistening. "I don't expect forgiveness." "You already have it," she said, "but that doesn't mean I want you back." Final scene. The possibility of peace. A week later, Mara walked alone in Prospect Park, autumn burning through the trees. The world was quieter now, less about resolution, more about rhythm. She didn't know if she'd ever fall in love again. Didn't know what Liam's life would look like or whether Elise would keep chasing ghosts. But she knew this. She had survived. And sometimes survival itself was the closest thing to a happy ending. Nick moved back to Boston 2 years after Mara and Liam's final, quiet unraveling. He bought an old brownstone with cracked bricks and ivy strangling the porch railings. It suited him. Something that looked fine from the outside but needed rebuilding at the foundation. He wasn't the same man who had once called Mara on a whim, desperation running through his voice like wildfire. He was quieter now, measured, but the guilt remained, like rust under his tongue. They hadn't spoken. In over a year, Mara had moved on. She was directing a community education nonprofit and occasionally posted thoughtful book recommendations on her Instagram. Nick never liked them, never commented, but he always read. One rainy Sunday, he found the courage to write her an email. It wasn't an apology. It was something more vulnerable. "Mara, I still think about that night. Not just the night you found out, but all the little moments that led us there. I want you to know I never stopped loving you. I just stopped knowing how to show it. I didn't deserve your forgiveness. But I hope somewhere you found your peace. I'm trying to become a better man. It's slow. It's messy. But it's honest." Nick, he never sent it. Just printed it out, folded it, and buried it beneath the rose bush in the small garden he'd planted behind his home. Chapter: A Face from the Past Won't. Winter evening, as snow dusted the stoop, someone knocked. It was Elise. She looked surprised to see Nick, but not shocked. I was in town for a conference. I wasn't sure if it was even fair to stop by. He let her in. Tea. Silence. Shared awkward glances over chipped mugs. You look better, she said softly. So do you. They sat by the window watching the snow. Two people who'd both broken something and were now carefully stitching their lives back. Together. I saw Mara, Elise admitted. Nick's eyes didn't flinch, but the tension curled in his jaw. She doing okay? She seems clear, like someone who walked through fire and learned to breathe smoke. He smiled, faint. That sounds like her. Then Elise reached into her bag and handed him a thin envelope. What is it? A letter. For her. I don't trust myself to send it, but I think it deserves to exist. Nick opened it only after she left. It was brief, just a poem Elise had written, about a woman made of glass who cracked but never shattered. Chapter. The unexpected call weeks passed. Then, late one night, Nick's phone buzzed. Mara, he answered with a hesitant breath. Hey. I got the letter, she said. No warmth, but no anger. Elise gave it to me. A long pause. I don't know why I'm calling, she admitted. I guess I needed to hear your voice. He closed his eyes. I think about you all the time, still. I know. I do too. Then, I'm not calling to reopen anything, just to tell you that I'm okay, and I hope you are too. I'm trying, he said. There was comfort in her voice when she said, good, no promises, no rekindling, just two voices on a quiet line, no longer weighted by silence. Epilogue. Somewhere between spring came. Elise returned to New York. Nick began dating again, slowly, cautiously. Mara took a sabbatical and traveled to Portugal alone, journaling on cliff edges and drinking dark wine under orange skies. They all carried the past like faded scars, no longer bleeding but never forgotten, and somewhere between regret and redemption, they each found a little room to breathe. The sky over Lisbon was a watercolor, blue and peach smeared above red-tiled rooftops. Mara sat on the terrace of a quiet cafe in Alfama, her notebook open beside a half-empty espresso. She had come here with no real plan, just the need to exist somewhere untouched by old memories. It was her third week in Portugal. She spent her mornings wandering the narrow cobbled streets, her afternoons writing observations in the margins of her travel guide, and her evenings wrapped in the music of fado singers whose voices carried both sorrow and sweetness. She liked it that way. She felt unobserved here, free, but even freedom had its echoes. That evening, she was sketching the silhouette of a cathedral when a voice spoke beside her table. Mind if I sit? She looked up. He was in his late 30s, maybe early 40s. Tired eyes, but kind. A quiet presence. American, judging by the accent. He wore a camera around his neck, not for show. Mara gave a small smile. Sure. I'm Jamie, he said. Mara. They talked. About nothing and everything. Travel. Writing. Mistakes they weren't ready to laugh about yet. He was a photographer, working on a series about grief and memory, capturing places people went to forget things. You don't look like someone trying to forget, he said. I'm not, Mara replied. I'm someone trying to remember who I was before everything. Jamie nodded. Then maybe we're in the same place. For the same reason. Chapter. The rooftop conversation. Days passed. They met again. Then again. It didn't feel like romance. It felt like trust, slowly unpacked between bottles of wine and walks along the water. One evening, on a rooftop overlooking the city, Jamie asked, "Do you still love him?" Mara didn't have to ask who he meant. "No," she said. "But I loved him deeply, and losing that, it changed me." Jamie nodded. "I get that," She looked at him. Do you ever feel like parts of you got lost in the damage? All the time, he said. But I think maybe those parts weren't meant to stay. Epilogue. Return back in New York, the city moved fast again. The silence she'd grown used to in Portugal was gone, replaced by sirens, horns, and a life waiting to be picked back up. She returned to her apartment and found Elisa's poem still tucked inside the drawer. She read it again, not with bitterness, but acceptance. A woman made of glass who cracked but never shattered. There was strength in breaking, and more in rebuilding. Jamie sent her a photo. It was of her on that Lisbon rooftop, laughing, unaware. She was being watched. The caption read, "Sometimes the light finds us again." Jamie's photo series, The Light Between Ruins, began quietly, with only a few prints hung in a tucked-away Lisbon gallery. It was meant to be a personal reckoning, a map of his own recovery from a broken engagement and the emotional fallout of his father's suicide. But something about the work struck people, unposed portraits of strangers who looked like they were carrying something invisible, people at train stations, cafes, windowsills, always in natural light, always surrounded by space. One photograph in particular caught attention. Mara, he titled it The Rooftop Laugh. A prominent curator from Boston requested to feature it in a traveling exhibit on grief and rebirth through image. Jamie hesitated, emailed Mara. She gave her blessing on one condition. "Let me write the caption," she said. What she wrote was simple. I was not smiling at the world. I was smiling because I realized the world could no longer break me the same way twice. Chapter Crossroads. The Boston leg of the exhibit opened in a converted warehouse in the Seaport district. Jamie flew in for the event. As he walked the gallery, he saw viewers pausing longest at Mara's portrait. Something in the way her eyes crinkled. How her joy felt hard-won made people linger. A woman near the corner was silently crying. And then Jamie saw someone else. A man standing very still in front of the rooftop laugh. Dark blazer. Posture slightly closed in on itself. Haunted. Nick. Jamie didn't recognize him at first, but when he stepped closer, something clicked. The resemblance to Mara's voice when she'd spoken about her past. The quiet weight of recognition in the man's stance. "Beautiful photo," Nick said without looking at Jamie. "She's a remarkable person," Jamie replied. Nick turned slightly. "You know her well?" "Well enough," Nick nodded. "I didn't expect to see her here, not like this. I didn't expect to feel this." Jamie waited. "I did something unforgivable," Nick continued. "And somehow, I still want her to be happy." Jamie hesitated. "She is, but not because she forgot, because she finally let go." Nick didn't reply, just nodded again, eyes still on the photo, then walked away. Jamie watched him disappear into the crowd. Chapter Letters. And other ghosts back in New York, Mara got a postcard. It was from Nick, no return address. "I saw the photo. You look like someone who survived herself. I hope the light stays with you." And Mara tucked the card between the pages of a book. The collected poems of Louise Gluck. It stayed there, a ghost of closure, not an apology. Not a rekindling, just acknowledgement. Jamie watched her do it. "You okay?" he asked. "Better than I've ever been," she said. They stood in silence, soft jazz playing from the turntable, rain tapping against the glass. Mara smiled. Not because she had moved on. The cafe she opened in Fort Greene was called Lumen. Sunlight streamed through high windows onto wooden floors. The menu changed with the seasons. The back room held monthly writing workshops, free for anyone grieving, rebuilding, or just lost. She didn't write much poetry anymore, but she published a memoir the year before. The Quiet Before. Critics called it a study in silence, survival, and self-respect. It never mentioned names. Not Liam, not Elise, not Nick, but readers understood. On weekends, Jamie helped manage the register or wandered with his camera through nearby neighborhoods. They didn't marry. Mara didn't want to. They called what they had a choosing, and that was enough. Some nights, when the last patron left, she'd turn the lights low, pour 2 glasses of wine, and sit with Jamie in the back. They rarely spoke of the past, but sometimes, when the mood struck, they'd laugh about it, softly, like people who had buried something properly. Nick, Beacon, and why he left corporate law. Opened a small firm in the Hudson Valley, handling housing cases and pro bono domestic advocacy. It didn't pay much, but he stopped needing expensive distractions to feel whole. Therapy taught him what pride had buried. His affair hadn't been a mistake of lust. It was about erasure, about his fear of being seen. He never remarried. Sometimes, he wrote long emails to Mara, only to delete them. Once a year, he visited the gallery where the rooftop laugh hung as part of the permanent collection. He never stayed long, just long enough to remember that healing doesn't always mean returning. Sometimes, it's knowing you should stay away. Liam and Elise, Miami, FL. They didn't last. The secrecy that had bound them in adrenaline unraveled in daylight. Liam left Elise after 2 years. She moved back to Florida and opened a yoga studio with a name Mara might have found ironically perfect. Grace and Fire. Liam tried to reconcile with Nick once. It ended in cold civility. Now Liam manages a chain of luxury fitness centers and posts daily affirmations that ring hollow even to himself. Jamie, Lisbon, and Brooklyn, he splits his time between their cafe and new projects abroad. His second photo series, Portraits of the Unsaid, focuses on survivors of emotional betrayal. The opening show included a new photograph of Mara, not laughing this time, but peaceful, reading, alone. The caption read, "Some people aren't meant to be rescued. They're meant to find the shore themselves." Final scene. Winter evening at Lumen snow fell lightly on Brooklyn as the cafe emptied. Jamie turned the lock on the door. Mara stood by the window watching the flurries. "Catching the streetlights. You think this is it?" she asked. "This?" Jamie shrugged. "Feels like a beginning." Mara smiled. "Feels like quiet. The kind you don't have to run from." She turned off the lights. Only the soft hum of the espresso machine remained. In the dark, surrounded by stories, they stayed, not happily ever after.